Is Apple on a winner with its new iGadgets and an all-in-one subscription service?
And how will Sony's PlayStation 5 fare in the next-gen console wars?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support. Hi there, welcome to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the weekly podcast where we sneak across the state borders to catch up with Australia's leading technology journalists and get the stories behind the tech news of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined, as always, by Alex Kidman, a man who has had a gutful of early morning product launches this week. Alex, you're still there. You're still with us, mate.
Look, ordinarily I might do a joke about being asleep, but it's 2020. Who sleeps properly anyway?
Speaking of not sleeping well, we're also joined by one of my fellow Melburnians stuck in lockdown. In the virtual Vertical Hold studios, we have one of my fellow tech writers at The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, Peter Wells. Peter, welcome back to the show. How have you fared with this week's early starts?
Look, to be honest, I meant to stay up for Apple, and I made it till about 1:30 in the morning. But you may remember that I've got a 1-year-old, and look, sleep just called to me, and my blanket was so warm. And before I knew it, I was making coffee, and it was 7 in the morning, and I caught up later.
Living the dream. Living the dream. All right, so this week we're chatting with Peter about all things Apple, new iPads, Apple Watches, all-in-one subscription services, the whole shebang, and how Apple might win a larger slice of our wallets through that. But first, it's also been another huge week in gaming as Sony reveals its hand in the next-gen console wars. For the latest, we caught up with The Age and Sydney Morning Herald's tech editor and gaming aficionado, Tim Biggs. Hi, Tim. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
So after lots of sneak peeks and leaks, Sony's finally put its cards on the table with the PlayStation 5. Tim, do you like what you see, and how do you think it stacks up against the competition?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was another of Sony's patented sort of video presentations where there was a lot of hype and everything looked really, really good, and then I guess the detail wasn't really apparent. But the big detail we did get, of course, was the pricing. So in Australia, the PS5 is going to be $749. And if you're willing to go without the disk drive, it's going to be $599. And I think that, that stacks up really well against the Xbox. They're very different sort of products. The PS5 is laser focused. It's an exotic machine for exclusive games. Both models are built exactly the same. Backwards compatibility is not a focus. Supporting the PS4 long term is not a focus. What you're getting with the PS5 are discrete games built just for it. And Sony's looking for a repeat of the PS4, I think, which is insanely popular. It's got the world's best studios making games exclusively for it. So why would it do anything else? The Xbox, on the other hand, is, it's building a platform, a ubiquitous platform across different consoles and PC and the cloud. So it's quite a different product. I think it's going to probably turn out like it is now with the Xbox Series X versus the PS4 Pro. The Xbox, it runs third-party games better, and you've got that Game Pass experience getting you a lot of games coming in without you having to pay extra for them. But it's not going to be enough to pull the mainstream away from, Sony and their exclusives, at least not until a few years down the track when Microsoft starts releasing its own.
It's such a different strategy, though, isn't it? When you look at this kind of two-model thing, because Microsoft has the S, which is very entry-level, quite different specs to the X, whereas the difference for Sony is basically that they seem to think that an optical Blu-ray drive's worth $150.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, on paper, I agree that the Series S is significantly lower powered than the Series X, but I'm not so sure what we're going to see, in the real world. Microsoft, of course, claims that the main difference is going to be one's in 4K and one's in 1440p. And I mean, the CPU is basically the same. It's downclocked, but it's basically the same. The hard drive is basically the same. The ray tracing tech, really the big difference is in RAM, right? So I think we could see that is accurate, at least at launch, where games are running identically in terms of frames on the Series S and Series X. In fact, we have seen, I think, Gears 5 running in 120 frames on both, just at different resolutions. But yes, over on the PS5, that digital edition is real. The price has been really dropped. Like that's a sweet spot they've hit at $600, I think. Clearly, they waited for Microsoft to drop their prices, and even I thought it was funny in the presentation they had the PlayStation boss Jim Ryan, and he didn't say the price because I don't think they had locked it in. He just said, "Well, now you know," and so they sort of
yes, it's true. It's true.
They just put it in with text. So
insert price here.
Yeah.
It's clear that they waited, and I think the reason is because they wanted to match the Series X, and then they wanted to put in something where someone's going to go, well, I could get the Series S, but the digital, I'm already not getting discs there, and the digital PS5 is only $100 more, and it's significantly more powerful. So I think Sony's been really smart, but I also think people who go for the Series S and are not using a 4K TV or don't care about 4K are probably still going to be quite happy.
The other big difference between the two console families is size. I was genuinely quite shocked by how big the PlayStation 5 is going to be. I think some people are actually going to have trouble fitting this into home entertainment units and things like that, especially, in fact, compared to things like the Xbox S, which is actually quite small.
It's absolutely immense. Yeah, I actually got out a tape measure and I was looking around my entertainment unit, and I think what I'm actually going to have to do is just have, because I've got an entertainment unit where like the top shelf goes all the way along, like there's no dividers. So I think I'm just going to have to clear it out and just have that space for the PS5, and put the Series X somewhere else where I can get a lot of air. Because if I put it, I'd have to put it in, horizontally, and it would literally be like chocked in there, like it would be blocked on all sides. So I think I just have to clear everything out for one console and then find somewhere around the room for the other. But the Series S, yes. They said it was the smallest Xbox ever, and when you sort of see it, a lot of US outlets got dummy units to play with, and when you see it against other consoles, it is striking. I guess the cooling systems do take up a significant amount of space on these consoles that are designed for 4K.
What do you think's the thinking there behind abandoning that convention? Do they think that people don't own AV cabinets, or because it's not the first time? The PlayStation 3, I thought that curved design was quite rude because it pretty much guaranteed you couldn't stack anything on top of it. It was literally the king of the pile. Is this another variation on that? We will stand out from the crowd. You can't just stick us in with everything else.
I think you've hit on something there, but I think it's designed to make sure it gets enough airflow, right? Because cooling temperature equals performance. You need it to be cooled properly. If they made it easy for you to stack things on top of it, you were going to stack things on top of it. So I think they really want it to be standing vertical. Both the PS5 and the Series X are clearly designed to be standing vertical. They let you do it horizontally if you want. But I mean, the Series X looks weird and it's not going to fit anywhere because it is like 15 centimeters tall. Like it's a chunky thing. And the PS5 requires, you have to take, I don't know if it's a separate stand. There's a stand that lies underneath it when it's lying flat. So it has airflow underneath it. It's not going to fit really in your standard place where you'd put a, like a PVR or something. It really demands to be standing up somewhere in your room with a big HDMI cable.
Look at me, love me.
Let's face it, like every PlayStation before it, at some point, this thing's just going to end up sounding like a jet engine as it tries to suck air in. It's going to happen. But you mentioned kind of the gameplay aspect of games and the visuals day one. One of the things that really surprised me with this particular reveal was we didn't see a lot of new games, as in we didn't see a lot of games we didn't already know about. There was a lot of Spider-Man footage and Resident Evil footage and games that were already announced that we'd seen bits of. We just saw more of them.
Yeah, I think maybe the elephant in the room kind of is that we are in the middle of an epidemic, a pandemic, and things aren't exactly things aren't exactly as they would be. I mean, not only would we have been having this discussion months ago during E3, if there was no pandemic. But if you look at the confirmed launch lineups, they're a little anemic compared to what you would normally expect. I mean, on the Xbox side, they had to delay Halo, which is a big blow to them, and so they're sitting with things like Ubisoft's putting out a bunch of new games, but then they've just got older stuff, Destiny 2, things like that. On the PlayStation side, I think it's similar. Fortnite and things that are already out but are getting an updated version, plus their two, big exclusives, which is Spider-Man and Demon Souls. And then apart from that, I don't think they have a whole lot for, the near term. So they've really they teased God of War with no,
No
sort of
detail
context at all.
Yeah.
And the rest of it was third-party stuff and Final Fantasy 16, which they've got the pocketbook out for and locked down for themselves. But yeah, you're right. It's not one of those ones where they say, we've been developing all these games and here they are, look at them, because I don't think they have been. I think everyone's found it quite difficult to get a lot done this year.
I guess, and actually with Spider-Man, though, of course, that's also coming to the PlayStation 4. Miles Morales is also going to be a PlayStation 4 title. So even it's not as exclusive as you might kind of think. I don't know if it's a sales argument, although I guess, what do I know? Because as we're recording this, I can see everywhere has sold out of pre-orders already. So if you're listening to this thinking, oh, I'd like one, you're probably too late for now.
Look, Sony's been pretty cheeky, I think, because either that or they've had an about face internally, because their initial sort of pitch was putting themselves very much in opposition to Xbox and saying, this is a new generation. Everything is purpose-built for PS5. You could not do this on a system that's not the PS5. Look at it. It's stunning. You need the hard drive. You need the ray tracing, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, Xbox was saying all our games are going to come to the previous generation and people using this generation will get their old games, and it's all sort of wishy-washy, which, I'm sure you noticed a lot of, PS4 and PS5 fans online just tore into them for it. And how could you expect Halo to be any good when it has to run on a thing from 6 years ago or whatever? Lo and behold, though, when we get to this point, PlayStation says, oh, actually, most of the games that we're talking about for PS5 will also come to PS4 because we don't want people to miss out on these games. And so I think either they just kept that to themselves in hopes of, stoking this sort of excitement, or they've realized that they actually don't have as many PS5 consoles to sell as they would like. A lot of people are going to be still playing on PS4 over the holidays, and they'd very much like to sell them some new video games.
Is that a change in strategy? I'm trying to think back to the last big round of console launches, which was 7 years ago. Actually, we're coming up on our 7th anniversary because our very first show was talking about the launch of the PlayStation 4. So we've come full cycle.
Yeah, we have.
We've lasted an entire games console cycle. That's a fair achievement. In dog years, that's forever. But in the last generation, was there as much talk about, okay, the games that are coming out for this generation of console will also play in the last generation of console?
No, because I think what happened was, showing my age, but like way back in the day.
Showing his age. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, this guy was in primary school when Alex and I started as journalists. Right? He has the nerve, the gall to say showing his age. Sorry, please continue, old man.
I saw a meme on Twitter that was just like, what gamer generation were you? And like the oldest it went was Nintendo 64. And I was just like, okay.
If anyone needs me, I'll be crumbling into dust over here.
I've died of old age. But yeah, so way back in the day, ancient times, backwards compatibility was a thing that people talked about, right? When you went from one system to the next, it was important to, keep your thing, because and even further ago than that, from like the NES to the Super Nintendo, whatever, not a thing. But as they went on, they said, especially for PlayStation, you've got the PS1, you want to move to the PS2, all your discs are going to work. And that happened for a couple of generations. And then when we got to the 360 and the PS3, it sort of fractured a little bit. Sony did it for a little bit and then pulled out of it. It was too expensive. And then what you're talking about, the 360 and the Xbox One and PS4, they just didn't do it. Because Xbox One was all about, being the middle of your lounge room and all of your, new fancy things, and all the games were all digital, and, so they didn't worry about stuff like that. and Sony certainly wasn't going to do backwards compatible with the PS3 because they probably would have had to put an entire PS3 inside the machine, which would have just been, ridiculous. But over the course of this generation, we've really seen people change their tune on that. We had Microsoft really turn around and say, actually, we want you to play the games that you want to play as opposed to just the games we want to sell you. So any game that you've bought on 360 or any game that you have digitally from back in the Xbox days, you can play it on the current system. You can put in your discs, whatever. And I think Sony's had to play a little bit of catch up on that. But as I said, it's a bit murky. They haven't been really, outright and said anything about it. We did see that they are giving, I think, 15 or 16 or something PS4 games to PlayStation Plus subscribers on PS4, PS5, which is weird.
I was going to get onto this. I think it's 18 games, but they have said it may vary by region, so we might not see everything that people might have read about online. But I was going to get onto this because Microsoft's strategy is so strongly pushed around Game Pass and subscription gaming and not necessarily owning the games, but just paying them a fee. And look, Game Pass is very, very good value, don't get me wrong. Sony kind of revealed their version of this morning with the PlayStation Plus collection, which, as you say, it's a selection of older, some very classic, some less so, PlayStation 4 games, which will come to the PlayStation 5 in the PlayStation Plus collection, although they're not going to charge extra for it in the way that they do, in the way that Microsoft does for Game Pass.
Right, but I mean, yeah, it's so weird and convoluted. But on Xbox's side, I think maintaining Xbox Live, Gold, and Game Pass is stupid, and they won't do it. I know they haven't made a specific announcement about it yet, but I have to imagine that Game Pass Ultimate is just going to be the thing that you pay for because it's very weird. And on the PlayStation side, it makes sense to not introduce, an extra tier. But at the same time, I just don't understand why they haven't come out and said what their position is or, clarified what's going to happen. Because as far back as the reveal of the console when Mark Cerny was talking about it and we didn't know what it looked like, someone was like, can we play PS4 games? And it's like, yeah, I guess so. And then they had to clarify it and say, oh, well, at least like the 100 most popular PS4 games will work on it. And people are saying, what does that mean? If I own a game, can I play it on the new system? So we don't know yet. We know that these old games, these PS4 games they're putting in the collection work on PS5. So you have to imagine that others do. But at this point, it's pretty weird.
So just to clarify, I thought I read that the PS5 would run PS4 games, but I'm not sure if it's hardware or software emulation. Was that clarified or not clarified?
Yeah, it very much wasn't, I think. It works with them, but what's not clear is if you own 100 PS4 games, for example, and you get your PS5 home and you turn it on, it's not clear what's going to happen with those games, whether you're going to see them in your library, whether you're going to see some of them. It's all that's clear at the moment is that if you subscribe to PS Plus, you will see these 16 or 18 or whatever games from PS4 that are available. I don't know if your save data will transfer over or anything like that.
And of course, if you buy the digital edition, you're not going to be able to slot a disc in there in any case.
But also, if you've got a big collection of PlayStation 4 games on disc and you buy a PlayStation 5 that doesn't have a disc drive, then you literally cannot play them. So you kind of need some visibility on that beforehand. What are you giving up? Like, is it worth paying extra for the drive so you can play the physical copies of all the games you own from the PlayStation 4, or are they a write-off as it is and they have to stick with that console? I think we need to know.
And that goes for the Xbox as well, because if you've got a big collection of digital 360 and Xbox games, then you can get either Xbox and it's fine. But when it comes to physical discs, the way it currently works is that you need to put the disc in to verify that you own it, and then you can play the digital copy. It doesn't actually play off the disc, but you need to insert it to verify that you own it. So if you get the Xbox Series S, you won't be able to play your collection of 360 or Xbox One games on it.
Well, the other thing that emerged with the games today as well, though, is it looks as though we're about to see a fairly big price bump. Reportedly, a whole bunch of the launch PS5 titles are going to cost north of $100, and usually that's collector's edition territory, not here's the regular pricing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so strange because I think what we're seeing is games expanding in price in both directions. Like, I think once upon a time, all games were packaged and sold at retail, and so it made sense to have one or two standardized prices. And those standardized prices have largely stuck, even as the value of our currency has changed a lot. And so now we're at the point where they're saying, $100 for this game that took 7 years to make and cost us millions and millions of dollars just isn't going to cut it. And I think that's fine. The problem I see is that if 125, which is the price, like Sony has confirmed, Demon Souls and Demon Souls is 125, and I think the Ultimate Edition of Spider-Man is 125, but there will be a $95 version. If that becomes the standard that all the games hit, then that's a problem. And also, if I'm going to be paying $125 for a game, I certainly don't want any level of microtransactions or extra additional purchases or anything like that. I think we need a tiered sort of structure where a game like a Spider-Man or a Demon Souls, fair enough, that can go at a premium. And then something like Marvel's Avengers, I still would only want to pay, $60 or $70 for that because I know they're making most of their money through things that people purchase afterwards. And then, of course, you've got a lower tier of digital-only games and indie games, which you see, even now, range from a couple of dollars through to $20 through to, $50.
Well, mark my words, the digital-only editions of Spider-Man and Demon Souls and all the rest of it, they won't be any cheaper. And I think this is the trap, potentially, for that digital edition, that you lose that ability to shop around for games.
Yeah, it's I don't know if they're really looking at it as a trap, but that's definitely a concern. If you can't, obviously trade in the games afterwards either, or share them easily between people. So there are definitely downsides that come with going all digital. I wonder though if the fact that they have digital boxes now and they're so much less reliant on retail, if you will see some shift in the practices. If you look at something like Steam, which doesn't have to worry about retails at all, things on that store are very, very competitive. There's a lot of games, and as I discovered recently, more games than I thought because I accidentally had the offensive filter check mark checked, which means I wasn't getting any of the sex games. And it turns out there's twice as many games on Steam as I thought there were. But if you look at that as a model, they have sales all the time. Games come out at a high price, but are very quickly discounted. And I wouldn't be entirely surprised to find a lot of games doing that over the course of this generation. Maybe not first party games, but a lot of games.
But Steam has defied Epic on the PC. There's no secondary store.
That's very true.
So it looks like it's going to be a pretty big battle between the two heavyweights, and we'll have to see how it plays out. Thanks, Tim, very much for joining us.
Thanks, gents.
So in any other year, Apple around this time would be announcing new iPhones, but pretty much every pundit picked that its Time Flies event would not, in fact, feature the iPhone 12, and that's exactly what happened. Peter, I know, and you said earlier, you were lucky and got to sleep through the Apple announcement, but once you'd woken up and brushed the cobwebs off your eyes, what was it that Apple actually had to say this week?
Yeah, look, they were never going to do the phone. They even said that straight up on their earnings call a couple of months ago that the phone would be delayed. And I think this is an interesting year, as it has been for everyone. Apple are going to run their own race this year. They pushed back WWDC.
Unlike every other year?
Well, I mean, it's a good point, but last year famously iOS 13 was pushed out the door way before it was ready, and it sucked. And that was so it could make the manufacturing date of the iPhone. I think this year they didn't want to redo that. iOS 14 is fantastic, so I'm glad that they've spent a little bit more time and taken a little bit. Paid a little bit more attention to the software as much as the hardware, and it just feels like that they are allowing the fact that the world has changed so dramatically. They're allowing themselves to have more breaks than they might otherwise have.
So, in terms of hardware, what we did see were new iPads first and foremost. The headline act there is, of course, the new iPad Air. And I'm kind of intrigued, and I think I'm most intrigued by the fact that it's sort of an iPad Pro Lite, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, this has been their pitch for the last two models of Air. That the very first Air was I think 2 years earlier iPad Pro at half the price, which is a pretty good deal. This year's Air, they've shut down the gap even more. This time it's basically the iPad Pro from last year coming out at half the price again. So I can see it does make the lineup very, very odd. I don't know. I see in your notes you're saying, like, does it make the case for the Air a hard one to sell? I think it makes actually the case for the Pro harder to sell, because if I'm buying the Pro and knowing a year later I could buy the exact same technology at half price, I'd probably wait the half a year or the year, sorry. So I don't know. It is a very strange lineup.
I think I agree with you on the Air, that actually the Air is probably a better buy, what with it having USB-C, to a lesser extent that Magic Keyboard support, not because the Magic Keyboard's a bad product, just because when it's that close to the price of the device, I think it's a harder sell. And just the kind of power of that kind of proposition.
Yeah, and look, to be honest, I think the Folio keyboard is better usability wise than the Magic Keyboard. The Magic Keyboard is a work of art. I'm sure it's going to be in museums from years to come, but using it's actually a little bit harder to use. So I think a standard keyboard is a little bit better. I do think the Air is a great purchase. I thought it was pretty cool last time when it was rejigged. I'm still when we talk about the iPad, every iPad has so much power in that hardware that is just not being used by the software. And so for me personally, if I was buying an iPad tomorrow, I would buy the entry level. I've been saying now for 5 years, and I continue to say that the entry level iPad is the best deal in technology at the moment. It is so cheap compared to everything else in the lineup and compared to what you get. And it's a fantastic machine. It now supports the pencil. It now supports the keyboard. And right now you're going to hit limits as a power user no matter what iPad you buy, because the software just doesn't make it as easy as using a laptop to move around.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So for me, buy the entry level. It's a fantastic one, and wait until maybe March. We might be able to see a mid-cycle refresh of Apple of iPad software. That tends to happen around Marchish. Hopefully, I've been hoping for the last 4 years now that's when we'll see the iPad really become a powerful computer.
So Apple made a big deal about the fact that how powerful these processors are, and particularly against your typical computer. Are they just bragging about their iPads, or are they laying the groundwork for this new generation of Macs?
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, the developer kit that they ship right now to developers has like 2 years old iPad processors in them, and it's still faster than most of the computers in their lineup. So they are... for years, Apple never talked about specs. Now they're going to go hard as they can, because they are creating their own chips, and they know that they're going to be able to beat Intel and AMD when it comes to processing power. So, yeah, look, they still haven't said which computer of their lineup is going to get the ARM chips first, but whichever one it is, it's going to be a screamer.
They've just got to hope they can keep their new ARM boss's NVIDIA suite, I guess, because that was one of the other bigger bits of news for this week. I guess if there's one thing on that Air, though, that I would hope would come both to the cheaper iPad and even to the iPhone, it's that Touch ID power button. Not a new idea. We've seen it in phones before, but gee, such a good idea for 2020 when we're all wearing masks.
Oh, absolutely. I switched back to an iPhone SE because it has Touch ID, and it's so much easier to unlock the phone when I'm out shopping. And that's, majority of the time when I need like shopping lists and things like that, I want to be able to quickly unlock the phone. So I would love to see this. I'm sure you guys are both old enough to remember that the Sony Xperias used to have
Yep.
the fingerprint reader in the sidebar button, and I loved that. I thought that was the best position of any of those fingerprint readers. I would love to see that come to the iPhone. Obviously, keep Face ID for when the world goes back to normal one day. But until then, throw in that button on the side. And I really do think that it has to be coming because Apple would not put in that much effort for the iPad, to be honest. That feels like a product that is hinting at what we're going to see in the iPhone.
They also, of course, announced new Apple Watches, and we were talking about kind of muddy product roadmaps. This one feels even muddier to me because you've now got the Series 6 and the SE, and you've still got the even cheaper Series 3. Talk me through which one I'd want.
Well, up until last week, when non-tech enthusiasts ask me what Apple Watch to get, I'd say that the Series 3. I think it's a fantastic watch that does what most people use and need out of it. It's got good battery life. It was the first good watch to have good battery life, so it makes sense to me that it's the first good
Showing
Apple
his
Watch.
age again.
Look, there are great smartwatches out there, but I think Apple's lead is pretty far at this point, and that which is a damn shame because obviously Google started the whole trend. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, but yeah, the Series 3 is still a fantastic watch, so I can understand people who just want the notifications and a little bit of fitness. Go for that. The SE, I haven't played around with it enough to understand why you'd get that over the 3. I'm sure there are reasons. The always on screen is actually quite useful and very nice, and it would be hard to go back if you had gotten used to that, but that's who knows. But yeah, there's the 6 that look, there's not a great amount of reasons to upgrade if you've got a 4 or a 5 to get the 6. I don't think, but that's fine. I mean, I would like to get more than 2 years life out of a $300, $400, $500, $100 device. So, and I think Apple are just so far ahead of any other smartwatch out there that they don't need to push the watch all that much further.
I might disagree with you on the Samsung front, but we can still be friends. The SE versus the 6, I guess, you get the blood oxygen meter. We've seen that on some other smartphones. And you get the ECG, which we are seemingly just never getting in Australia anyway. I would probably push people towards the SE as the middle ground if you were buying new right now. But I agree with you. Upgrades are not the way to go. The other thing that they talked at some length about during their launch was their new kind of services bundling. There's a fitness service that we don't know a whole lot about, but we do know a fair bit more about Apple One. Are you going to be rushing to invest in an Apple One subscription?
This might surprise you, but no. Even as the Apple nerd on the show today, and I have more Apple devices than I care to admit in front of me right now, I don't see the reason for me. I think it's the very top tier, the premier level would be great if you have a family of people who all use Apple devices. But for me personally, Apple Arcade is fun, and if I had time, sure, I would be playing Apple Arcade. And if my kids were at that age where they were really interested in those kind of games, to be honest, I'd tell them to get a Switch. But either way. Look, Apple Arcade is very nice. I don't really need it. Apple TV, it's okay. It's no Netflix. I use Spotify over Apple Music. So the only thing I would care about in the bundle, and Apple News is terrible, by the way. The only thing I care about in the bundle would be, I still think their iCloud storage limits are terrible. I think that they need to push those up a little bit. So at least you're getting a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
How much do you get with this subscription?
With this, you get, I think, 200 gigabytes. Let me just check, or maybe 2 terabytes. So 2 terabytes on the family plan. The naming is terrible. 200 gigabytes on the family plan, which is Music, TV Plus, Arcade, and iCloud. And then on the Premier version, you get Music, TV, Arcade, iCloud, News Plus, and Fitness Plus. And you get 2 terabytes in that one. So the only thing that really makes sense for me is that 2 terabyte Premier level that includes fitness and arcade if you've got a whole family using Apple devices. And I'm sure there are people out there. I've got a friend of mine actually who is exactly that situation. I'm not there yet. Maybe when my kids are a little bit older, that will make a lot more sense to me. But at this stage, I just don't see the value proposition for me. Although, having said that, fitness looks fantastic.
What is it?
So fitness is a series of, I think there's 16 workouts bundled to begin with. And if you've used Nike's Apple Nike software, I think it's one of the better versions of fitness out there. Like the videos are always very well produced, and then there's just a decent kind of steepness of exercise that is built into Apple's products, I think. This is the thing that is going to really sell a hell of a lot. I know a lot of people who are extremely excited about this, even though it was only announced this week. Peloton Sales, which Peloton is a brand that really isn't here in Australia yet, but is doing great business over in the US. Their stock just tanked on this announcement because the whole idea is, you have with just one device, you've suddenly got all of the fitness tutorials and results and everything else either on your Apple TV, on your watch, on your iPad. It was great to see the iPad get some love because I can imagine, popping up a bigger screened iPad on a exercise bike, for instance, and working out with those workouts that they give you. And as you're doing it, you're seeing all of your vital stats. It's basically, if you've ever been to one of those super, super fancy gyms and you see all of the crazy stuff you get on those very expensive dashboards, if you have an iPad, you can bring all of that to your crappy gym, or because all your gyms are closed at the moment, you can bring that to your couch. And I think that's going to be the major reason why that is just going to go gangbusters.
I don't see it. I really don't see it. I actually think it's pretty bad value. And I'm not being contrary for the sake of it. This is not me devil's advocating. I don't see it at all. I can get an awful lot of fitness instruction, and it's not interactive. If this was one-on-one, if this was some dude is actually telling me personally what to do and how to stretch, that's different. But this is not that. I can get an awful lot of that stuff on YouTube for nothing, or if I've got a Google subscription without ads for a little bit of money. A lot of the biometrics you're talking about there are built into the watch, and I find it a little bit worrying, this idea that Apple says, well, if you really want to make good use of them, you have to pay us more money to do it. I actually think this is a poor product. But having said that, it totally fits in with that Apple-controlled, wall-gardened ecosystem thing. I agree. Some people are going to go nuts for it. But then I don't think Apple One is great value either, for the reasons you've said, although you didn't. I don't think you mentioned the individual level plan, which only has 50 gig of iCloud storage. That's just terrible.
Yeah, you can't even back up the lowest level iPhone on the individual plan. And at that point, what is the point,
So the closest comparison to this would maybe be Amazon Prime and all of things they bundle. Although I do notice that it's annoying in Australia, they don't include Amazon Music with Amazon Prime and they do in the US.
So just to clarify that though, Adam, you get this weird thing called Amazon Prime Music, and it cuts it down from like 60 million tracks to 2 million, which is smaller, but it's $7 a month or cheaper if you do annual. Amazon, and I'm not spruiking for the company particularly, but I ran all the numbers on this week. Amazon has a much better overall offering unless you're really deeply in that Apple ecosystem, and especially into iCloud.
Yeah, I know that's absolutely right. I actually set up my Amazon Prime weird half subscription thing today because I was sick of my kids' terrible, Wiggles tracks getting into my Spotify. So now I'm going to use that. But yeah, I would actually compare it more, at least on the individual level, to Office 365, which I think is a fantastic deal. And if you do that, you've got more than enough space to back up your phone and your laptop. It's harder work. Like, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to kind of push the backups in a way that is not as beautiful and seamless as iCloud is. But if you're a nerd, and you are because you're listening to this, then that's probably a better way to go.
Yeah, also, Office 365 is pretty weak on the streaming video and gaming fronts, I find.
That is true.
Is that Flight Simulator still built into Excel? I suppose that counts.
I want to see Excel on Twitch. That'd be huge.
It's out there. I'm sure it is. Yeah, no, and I did think, to your point earlier, Alex, I did wonder about Fitness Plus versus YouTube. And I bet within a couple of months we're going to see a fitness kind of channel, dedicated fitness channel experience come to YouTube, because they could bundle that in, and like you said, if you either get it for free, ad supported, or you pay a couple of bucks and you don't have to see ads on YouTube anymore. I just find that YouTube is just still such a mess when it comes to coming up with these kind of like streams of interest. I mean, I've subscribed to a whole bunch of stuff, and YouTube still doesn't understand exactly what I want, which is just blows my mind, considering how much information Google as a company has about me. They have my calendar, my email. They know everything I've watched online for the last God knows how long, and they still suggest things to me that is in no way of interest to me.
Oh, YouTube can for sure be messy. Now, you mentioned this right at the start, actually, around iOS drops. And one of the other surprising things was Apple saying, oh, yeah, by the way, all of our mobile OSs and tvOS, they're getting updated this week. Was it a surprise to you that they didn't hold off on the iPhone releases to do that? Because they could have done that.
Absolutely. I was shocked. And look, I'm on a chat with a bunch of developer friends, and I was shocked as a consumer going, oh, that's interesting. I get it tomorrow. They were terrified as developers who had none of their like normally the way this normally goes is there is a what is called a gold master that exists for about a week before the official one goes live. And until that gold master comes out, those iOS guys, they can be building against the newest software, but they can't actually test it with their users, like with their people on their test flights, until the gold master comes out. They're not allowed to share it outside of their internal kind of firewall. And so suddenly Apple, normally what Apple would do at any launch is highlight all of the companies that have got the best take on, iOS 14 widgets, or the best take on what other new feature is out. You don't see that in the Apple Store, in the App Store today, because none of the developers were ready. None of them have shipped any of that stuff yet. So it's really weird that,
Apple's
iOS 14 has come out.
Developers? I'm shocked. Such a thing is unheard of.
Look, the ones I spoke to wouldn't have gone so far as to say screwed over. Just
this is why Apple doesn't return my calls.
Yeah, they just lost a couple of years of their life when they woke up that morning.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Peter for joining us for this week's show.
Thank you, guys.
And Peter, if folks want to find your work, or indeed find your good self on social media, where do they do that?
On Twitter, Peter Wells. I got the name early.
And if they want to find your work?
Oh, yeah, I still work sometimes. Look, just follow me on Twitter and I'll point to stuff that's interesting.
Awesome. And also a big thanks, obviously, to Tim Biggs, who you can find online at smh.com.au, or Tim Biggs on Twitter. And of course, you can catch up with us on Twitter, and that's at verticalhold.au, online at verticalhold.com.au, or via the Vertical Hold Facebook page.
And as always, thanks everyone for listening. It was a big show this week. Don't forget to tell your friends, and we really appreciate your shout outs and reviews to help us spread the good word. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support.
People seem willing to spend that extra money, and I think that the Pro model has always been as a courier knocks on my fucking door. Give me a second. Where was I?